When Xbox started putting their games onto PlayStation, I think a lot of people saw it as this huge paradigm shifting moment for the industry. And in a lot of ways it was, but to me it wasn't too surprising. We have to remember that Xbox just spent almost $70 billion on its Activision acquisition, which was not only Xbox's biggest acquisition, but it was also Microsoft's biggest acquisition ever in their long history. I'd be genuinely curious about the specifics behind the scenes, like why Microsoft approved such an acquisition, such a costly endeavor, but they did. And I think over the next year, Big Daddy Microsoft went over to Xbox and was like, hey, listen, it's time you started making us some money. And unlike the Xbox audience, which has been trained over the past few years to just wait for games on Game Pass, the PlayStation audience often does buy games. Because yes, while PS Plus Premium and PS Plus Extra do offer a really awesome game library, nobody expects first-party PlayStation games to come to those libraries for a very long time. So PlayStation fans are used to spending $60 or $70 for a big new flashy game on their console. But a couple of days ago, it was announced that Helldivers 2 would be coming to Xbox consoles, and that right there was the weird one for me. That was the one that made me stop in my tracks. But again, if we want to get specific, this isn't really the first time something like this has happened, because back in 2021, MLB The Show 21 came to Xbox consoles. As far as I know, there's been no official reason stated why this happened, but I think exactly the same thing with Microsoft and Xbox happened. Big Daddy MLB went to Sony and was like, hey, we can make a lot more money if we weren't just on PlayStation, so do that now or we'll find somebody else to make our games. And Sony really had no choice but to agree to that. And we also can't forget that just last year, LEGO Horizon released on Nintendo Switch, which I found definitely peculiar because Horizon is one of their biggest IP right now. And there's also a few random other games like Freedom Wars and the upcoming Patapon 1 and 2 collection that are coming to Switch. So Sony isn't as restrictive as their IP as I once originally thought. And yes, I know a lot of people are going to bring up that their games have been migrating to PC for the past few years, but I think that's totally different because the PC audience typically is very strictly PC. They don't migrate to console. Maybe they would get a Nintendo console because they know damn well that there's no chance of Nintendo games coming to PC for a very long time. But I also know that Switch piracy is pretty big, so I don't think they even really care about that. I think Sony realized that most PC players are just not going to buy a PlayStation, so they figured why not at least get some software sales. But Helldivers is the big one to me, because you are now putting your game on what was once seen as your biggest competitor. But if we're being brutally honest, Xbox has not been PlayStation's competitor for like the last 5 years. And Nintendo and Sony do two very different things with their fan bases, so I don't even think they're competitors either. But unfortunately, video games are tied to the console war, so right now it really is Sony versus Nintendo, just like it was back in the 90s. So let's just sum it all up. Xbox games can be played on Xbox, PC, and PlayStation, and also some on Switch. PlayStation games can now be played on PlayStation, PC, a few little random ones on Switch, and 2 on Xbox. This is something nobody would have imagined 10 years ago. I was too young to fully grasp this moment, but this must be what it felt like to see Sonic land on the Game Boy Advance. It must be just bizarre and otherworldly. I've been seeing this take go around online that I would describe as kind-hearted, generous, and forward-thinking. And that take is that gaming has moved past exclusives. And while I totally see what people are saying, I do think at the end of the day there's always going to be room and purpose for exclusives. Because without exclusive games, where does your console's identity really come from? The only answers I could think of are your UI, your digital storefront, your controller, and I just don't think that's a compelling reason to persuade you to get a console. When I was a kid, I grew up with a PlayStation 2, but there was this other kid who lived around the corner from me, and I would go over to his house all the time and play the GameCube, and I was so confused at these games. Like when I saw Mario Sunshine and Pikmin and Super Smash Bros. Melee and Wind Waker, I'm not gonna lie, I was jealous because I couldn't get any of those games on my PlayStation 2. And say what you want about that, but that's exactly what a business wants, right? They want to make you feel like you can only get this specific high quality product with them. And this isn't just a gaming thing either. Back when I was young, you were either a Cartoon Network kid because you loved Powerpuff Girls and Ed, Edd n Eddy and Billy and Mandy, or you were a Nickelodeon kid because you loved SpongeBob and Jimmy Neutron. There were also the Toon Disney kids, but we don't really talk about them. I guess a more accurate comparison would be the streaming services that we have today, because many shows are exclusive to one streaming platform. So if you're fortunate enough to have enough money to subscribe to all of those streaming services, congratulations, you can watch anything you want. But the rest of us have to pick and choose what shows really matter to us. And I honestly don't think that's a bad thing. The reason I got a Wii U back in high school when none of my friends had a Wii U is because there were so many games that I wanted to play that I knew would never come to any other console. And when my friends would come over, they loved it. They loved Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. They loved Mario Kart 8. They loved Nintendo Land. I even got a ton of hours out of Pikmin 3's co-op mode. And yes, the Wii U does have the sad reputation of being one of Nintendo's biggest failures, but to me personally, it has the reputation of just having a stellar library of games. And if it didn't, I reiterate again, if the Wii U did not have a stellar library of games, then why did all of the ports on the Switch sell so well? It's because they were great games, just nobody wanted a Wii U. And here's the last thing I think I'll say on this point, right? Everyone keeps saying that gaming doesn't need exclusives anymore. Well, guess what those same people are saying? Those same people are making fun of Sony and the PlayStation 5 for having no games. So which one is it that you want? Do you want no exclusives, or do you want exclusive games made by studios owned by the company that made your console? Because here's the thing, PlayStation 5 does have a lot of games. But what people are saying when they say PS5 has no games is that it has no Sony games. So again, you're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth. What do you want? If you don't care about exclusives, then PS5 does have games. A large factor in my decision to seek out a Switch 2 early is because I really wanted to play Donkey Kong Bonanza, because I am a huge 3D platformer fan, and I know Nintendo, historically speaking, has made phenomenal 3D platformers. And guess what? Donkey Kong Bonanza will not be on PlayStation. It will not be on Xbox. If it was, there's a good chance I would have waited a couple of months to buy a Switch 2. I do apologize if it seems like I'm speaking about this topic through rose-tinted glasses, because I did bring up 2 examples from my childhood. But again, I just think there are modern examples outside of gaming that back up my point. Just look at iPhones and Androids. Androids can do a lot more than iPhones can. So if you're the type of person who really wants to get into the nitty-gritty aspects of your phone and customize your phone experience, then you would get an Android. But if you're not that type of person and you just want a very sleek, almost zero issues operating system, then you get an iPhone for iOS. I've had experience with both. I've had many years of experience with an Android and many years of experience with an iPhone. And over time, I've come to just have my preference. And you know, it would be different if having that preference locked me out of a key feature of my phone. Like, imagine if iPhone users and Android users couldn't text each other or call each other. That's why I think this whole thing with exclusive games that I'm talking about is different than something like when cross-platform became the norm. Even though games today still kind of don't launch with cross-platform, like Night Rain, which was really stupid. But moving on. Cross-platform gaming just made sense, because again, we all have our preferences. So if I prefer Gears of War and Halo over The Last of Us and God of War, should that really mean that I'm not allowed to play Fortnite or Call of Duty with my friends? Of course not. But exclusive games, man, like, I don't know, maybe I'm alone in feeling this way, but I kind of feel like that's the whole reason you get a console. So what do you think? Am I just being too nostalgic and holding on to the days of exclusive games, or do I bring up a few good points? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you so much for spending your time with my video. I hope you all have an amazing day.